All right, hello there, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Masmorra.
I'm T90.
And this is episode 16 of the Town Center, your podcast dedicated to all things Age of Empires. In today's show, the ShenAiXie Cup is now over. And to say this tournament had a few surprising results here and there, Tristan, would be the understatement of the year. Sounds very clickbaity, I know, but this time it's actually true. Then there's a new tournament coordinator in town, and you won't believe who that is. Or maybe you will, you know? And with only a few days left till the closing of the Red Bull ladder, we'll have a look at how things currently stand and speculate a little bit about what to expect during the finish line. As always, if you happen to enjoy the show, make sure to like it, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. It's free and it does help us a lot. If you missed our last episode, well, first of all, shame on you. And second, you might be wondering, what's this beautiful, handsome Florida man doing next to me on the screen? Well, as most of you will know, my co-host Viper has recently become a father, and we here at the Town Center podcast would obviously like to congratulate him and Debbie for this amazing news. But that means he'll be taking sort of a paternity leave from the show. And in the meantime, I'm very happy Tristan accepted our invitation to replace him. And I'm very excited to talk some Age of Empires with him. Tristan, good morning to you, my friend. You got some big shoes to fill here, bruv.
Yeah, I know. The pressure's on. The pressure's on.
Yeah,
He
already started giving you the pressure at the end of the last episode, you know? Just to make sure that you don't mess up, you know? No pressure, though, again. Hey, listen. As long as all your takes here are going to be as spicy and as good as your farm take, I'll take it. I'm sold, bro.
You prepped that one, dude.
No. Let's just keep on with it. Totally unprepared. Yeah, it's great to have you here, Tristan. Always awesome to talk to you about Age of Empires 2. And we'll jump right into it. So well, fair warning, first of all, we're going to be talking about tournaments. And of course, lots of spoilers will follow regarding recently finished and ongoing tournaments, of course. But Tristan, by the time folks are listening to this, it will have been 2 days since the final of the ShenAiXie Cup, the 1v1 Arabia-only $20,000 tournament. By the way, Orion made fun of my supposedly bad Chinese pronunciation, but apparently mine was better than his. So hey, I'll take that W. Thank you very much. Now, Tristan, I've been watching professional Age of Empires 2 for a long time, and I cannot remember another tournament with even close to as many upsets as this one. So we had Doubt, Tato, Leary, Viper, ACCM, Mr. Yo losing the round of 16. And if that wasn't enough, Hera lost in the quarterfinals against Sito. And Hera has been the, what would you say, the best player for the last 2 to 3 years, something like that?
Yep, somewhere along
those lines, I would say. The whole thing was obviously won by Sebastian, of course, the man of the moment, the wonder kid, the rising star of the community. And he won the tournament by beating Vinchester pretty comfortably, I must say, 5-1. And Tristan, as a fan of the game, it's amazing seeing a group of players outside of the usual suspects playing Age of Empires 2 at such a high level. Those semifinals were sick. Those were something else. Both Vinchester against Barles and Sito against Sebastian. I was watching on your channel, by the way. You did an amazing job, as always. But the question here on everyone's mind, of course, is going to be, how do you explain this amount of upsets in a tournament?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's easy to explain it. I think it's probably a perfect storm of many different things. The first one being we got a little lucky. Not the players who lost, but everyone who likes these types of upsets maybe got a little lucky, right? If we were to have this exact same tournament again, another time, I think it's very likely this does not happen again, at least not to the same extent, and have so many names go down early. That's the first thing, which, comes with any tournament. But the other one, gonna have to go to bat for Arabia a little bit here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the reason that people play Arabia so much is due to the variance that can happen, the possibilities to find damage, to boom, that just the variance that is allowed. And mixed map tournaments are amazing. I host mainly mixed map tournaments myself, but usually, while each map plays out very differently from the previous, it's weird. I don't want to say it's more cut and dry on how to play it, because that's not always the case, but you have less possibilities for damage through each age. So I think in some ways, just the craziness of the map combined with, having a really competitive scene right now, just, made some magic happen.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I think a lot of those things play a role for sure. But I believe, well, as always, there are several factors at play here. It could be a lot that these players are focusing on Empire Wars right now. There were some people talking about this. We have the qualification ladder running. It could be that the prize pool is not big enough. It could also be that Warlords had just like recently finished, sort of. It could be all of those things. But in my opinion, Tristan, the main reason here would be that, man, these guys, this new generation of players, Cito, Mihai, Sebastian, these guys are fast. These guys are very mechanically skilled, you know? And so I believe when you combine that with the fact the tournament was played on the ladder, on the Arabia map that is on the ladder, you know, which is a map they play every day, many hours a day. Well, then I think like the strategic advantage you would expect someone like Doubt to have, or Viper to have, or Herder to have, all of that suddenly plays much less of a role, I believe, because these guys, they know what to do on Arabia, and also they have lots of experience in it. And there's also the fact that this tournament didn't have a drafting system. And, you know, when you think about players like Doubt or Tato, they tend to specialize in these things. And as Viper told in the last episode, many games are sort of won after the drafting system. So when all of that is gone and suddenly you only have a map where so many saves are viable, I believe this somewhere has to play a role.
Yeah, I mean, and to clarify, I know what you meant. There was a drafting system, but it's very different, right? It's not like...
I'm so dumb. Of course,
I know what you meant. Right, yeah. Just trying to, you know, make sure that's clarified.
No, correct my misinformation.
Like, it's very different.
Please do it. Yeah, please do.
It's very different. You know, and it's interesting to think about. I didn't think about it till you brought it up, but like I just went through the listed names here, and I'm thinking like, okay, you look at the matchup. Who has played more ladder Arabia games? And it's actually fairly interesting, right? Like Cito Hera, I think Hera probably plays more. Hera plays a lot of games. Cito Doubt. Cito probably playing more ladder games. Andy Tato. Andy's probably playing more ladder games. Tato notoriously not playing a lot of ladder. Sebastian Leary, definitely Sebastian. Mihai Viper, these days Mihai, you know. So maybe that has something to do with it. And you know, the big thing though, when you think of Sebastian and Mihai, maybe even like Barles, like when these guys started to get really good over the last few years, people start to see them, and I would try and explain to them the type of player they are. And in our community, we're typically saying, this is an Arabia player.
Right.
This is an Arabia player who has to learn these other maps and the depth of, you know, a closed map or a water map. And yeah, you're right. This is like very much a comfort zone for them, and they were able to make it happen. So I'm really happy for them. I also think that maybe, you know, the tournament being announced a little bit last minute, having some type of conflict, maybe with some other things, made certain people still take it serious, but not to the level of seriousness that these other guys, they're like, "Ooh, hold on a second. Viper's about to have a kid. Viper's about to have a kid. Let's go, baby." Right, you know, this other thing's happening. Let's go. So it was just a whole like bunch of factors combined. But when you watch the gameplay of those of the favorites who lost, it was solid gameplay. It was not well below their best in most instances. And it was, if there was anything that happened that was wrong for a favorite, it is extremely harsh to then immediately say that, oh, the favorite threw, because what actually happened, and I think a good example of that was the Cito Hera series, is the underdog freaking made him work, right? And found cracks in the armor and got some crazy results.
Man, Cito, I gotta say, I believe the last tournament he played, Arabia tournament, was the KOTD 5. Which I believe he blew Leary out of the water, if I'm not mistaken. 3-0.
Yes, he 3-0'd Leary.
He lamed Leary in every single game. He tried to do it against Hera as well, with very positive results as well, I gotta say. But yeah, for me, what I think is happening here is that these guys that are sort of below the top 5 or below the top 8 even, these guys are incredibly skilled mechanically speaking. They're fast, they have the multitasking, they have it all, you know? And so when you make the strategic part of the game suddenly slightly less important than it might be on other maps that they are not used to play, I believe suddenly you get all of these upsets. That would be my explanation. I mean, not the only explanation, of course, but something around those lines. But I want to focus a little bit here on Sebastian. Tristan, this guy has been playing out of his mind Age of Empires 2. And he's a young guy, he's 22, but he's not a new player. I'm pretty sure, please correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm pretty sure I remember him from the Vuli days, where I think he would have been like, was it 2K, 2K1, something like that?
So it's interesting. I mentioned this yesterday, and a bunch of people were like, wait, what? That was him? So he wasn't known as Sebastian on Vubli at all. His name
Subotai
was
or something, wasn't it?
Call Me Subotai. Yeah. Call Me Subotai, which I thought was awesome. That was like back when like Hidden Cup 2-ish happened, you know, and Subotai was one of the names, you know.
Oh, I was about to
but
ask
he
you
was
if
like,
Subotai has got a meaning. I have no clue. So that's like a hero in Age of Empires 2 or something.
yeah. It's a historical figure, and then a hero in the game too.
I knew it, of course. Of course I knew it.
But yeah, I mean, his rise has been fairly fast. 4 years ago was beating him on the ladder every time I played him. Right, so
Very
it's not
casually
like
mentioning that, of course.
It's depressing, is what it is.
Well, fair enough.
It's depressing because there's more examples too.
Fair enough.
But no, that it's actually been very rare how quickly he's risen, and I think it doesn't seem like 4 years is quick to a lot of people, but in actuality, everyone who we're talking about has usually been around close to 10, right? And I think he's been playing for a while, but I looked at his Wikipedia page, and realistically is when results in tournaments really start to show up is like 2022. So he hasn't been playing in tournaments for very, very long. And I've just loved his progression because so what is so common is a player with talent gets to the big stage and you can tell they've got promise, they've got talent, and it's either just the nerves of the moment or their understanding of the game or preparation isn't there, right? And that stays with people their whole careers, right? This is maybe a bit of an unfair example. I actually think he's gotten a lot better in this regard.
You're going to talk about Nikov for sure.
Nikov, yeah. Dude, like and you and I've been around, like we go back 9-10 years, and it's the same thing. It's the nerves of the moment for Nikov is there.
Bro,
it's hard to shake that.
Let me interrupt you. I'm old enough to remember Nikov losing to Spaden in Clash of the Titans.
Let's go. That's crazy.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I mean, then that would have been like 2013, 2014?
2012, I think. No, you're right. 2012. Clash of the Titans, 2014, maybe? I'm confused right now. It might be
somewhere in there.
Yeah, so I'm always extremely fascinated by these kinds of players who've been around for a decent time and then all of a sudden just explode in skill and start seeing massive results. We sort of saw that with Hera too, I believe, though in his case, I believe it's pretty easy to track when this rise started. It's when he started streaming more and more, I believe, in my opinion. In the case of Sebastian, though, I know you talk with these folks all the time and you play against them. You just said, how do you explain this kind of development?
It's really tough. I mean, even Hera, he was playing at a top 20 level at 2015, right? So like, and then it was 5 years later in 2020 when things really started to go up. So that was still a long period of time. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. So in this case, if you are a really talented individual right now, there's so much information and there's so many examples of how to play with all the tiny little intricate details that are accessible and you can put into your brain right away, right? That was not the case in the past.
Nope.
Also, in the present era, if you lose one tournament, you're not waiting another year for your next experience. You're waiting another week for your next experience.
True.
And you have to lose a lot to eventually win. That's just the reality of it. You have to learn hard lessons in the draft and in the games too. So I think that it would be interesting for someone to get the numbers. But if you were to look at a pro player from like 2017 to 2020, talk about how many tournaments they played and how many wins or losses, then go from 2022 to 2024, I guarantee you the last 2 years has brought them way more. So I think that's really good for any player, right? Then you combine the fact that he's, as far as I know, like pretty close to full time right now. Money goes a long way in Uruguay compared to maybe some other countries. He's younger, right? He has the time, the energy, the motivation. He doesn't have to have that conflict of families or jobs or whatever that many people would face. And then his team that has formed recently with a lot of players in the same category as him, where they can kind of work together on pushing themselves, training and bettering themselves. Again, another perfect storm. But what I cannot explain easily is the mindset change that he has had.
Oh, was he like a shaky player, like in the early days? Because
not like hugely, but like enough is noticeable when you would cast him. Like, dude, Hidden Cup, Alfred the Alpaca was clearly a very talented player that was nervous as hell, right? And then like Warlords, he's just like, comes back 3-1 down against Yola, gets nothing. Beats Tato in the 3rd place match. This tournament wins then it was Thalassocracy Cup, beats Tato, beats Stout, wins. This tournament, he felt inevitable.
Beats Leary, yep.
Beats Leary. I mean, that shift was so quick because Hidden Cup was 6 months ago. So whatever's working for the guy, he shouldn't stop
keep
it.
doing.
But,
he's got this aura of coolness and, of just, he's got it together. It's like the feeling when I hear him talk. It's just so well put together, really calm, really cool. I agree 100%, and I was just about to bring it up with the Fox thing, him joining Team Fox. I've already talked about this before. I believe this plays a huge role, especially for these guys that are trying to go full-time and don't know, should I really put more hours into this or not? I believe getting a little bit of financial support, however small, helps justify to yourself and especially to your family and friends. Why do you keep putting hours and hours into playing a computer game? Because then you could go like, hey, see, I'm making a little bit of money out of this. And as you keep improving, hopefully, then next thing you know, you're winning, $400 from Titans League. Then you'll go from that, you go to $1,500 from King of the Desert, then Hidden Cup 5, what was it, like $3,000 maybe? And then Warlord, $6,000. And all of a sudden, things are just working for you and working in a big way. I believe that plays a huge role too.
Yeah, I think even bigger than that, just because our esports scene is so small, is I believe that like having some type of like dedicated, organized belief in you is nice, right?
True.
You think of these guys, they do stream, but they're not like, my situation or Viper situation where they got these massive communities that really are visibly there in their chats, having their back in the same way, right? Like my day-to-day is for my community. For them, they're just loading up doing some training games. And I think to have like the staff of Fox pump them up, to pick them, talk to them, to give them a jersey, and then to have their crew work together, I think that goes a long way. And I remember my eyes kind of opening up to this a little bit when I had discussions with Leary and Hart before they joined Wii Sports, and just like kind of hearing them talk. And it really felt like, even if it wasn't a ton, they wanted someone to go to them and be like, hey, we choose you. And that does a lot for people. And it, gives you something more to fight for. So I've been really happy for everyone. I think there's a lot of players on Fox that are really underrated right now, and they seem to work well together. So
becoming less and less underrated, gotta say. Want to talk a little bit about Vinchester as well, Tristan. I'm also very happy to see that he's back to great results. He's one of those top guys who's been plagued by very erratic performances, I would say, in the last few years. I remember him winning Titans League and then being demoted in the next season. But I believe in Arabia specifically, he's always been amazing. In fact, I was just thinking about this morning. I know what you're going to say. Yeah, I remember this as it was yesterday. His first standout performances was in the tournament called the Arabia Invitational at 2016. Was that what you thought I was going to say?
I think it was went 5-2 yo.
Not bad. 5-1. Not bad. Not bad though. Okay. But I remember this as if it was yesterday because it was the last game that I officially cast. So I have great beamers from it. And the funny thing about this tournament, Tristan, is the guy wasn't even invited at first. So
really?
Yeah, this was an invitational tournament. He wasn't even invited at first. He only got to play because Barrels couldn't make it. So another game that keeps reappearing. And I just went through the brackets this morning again, just, for nostalgia's sake. And things were different back then, man. I don't remember any of this, but apparently Tim resigned from the tournament because he didn't accept one admin decision. So he just resigned. You got Hera. He also resigned from the tournament after losing one series, but I don't know what the reason was. But can you just imagine the drama if that was today, man?
Yeah. It was a different time, dude. It was a different time. I look back on these... It's easy to look back on these days with rose-tinted glasses, and there's good reasons for that. But also, like, players just dropping out of tournament because they lose a game or they get annoyed at the admin would suck, I
say that all the time, Tristan. It was amazing back on Voobly, all of that, great times, great memories. But today is so much better, bro. So much better.
Yeah.
In any case, we're just talking about Vinchester being good on Arabia. But you have that 2016 Arabia tournament that I'm very happy you actually remember. And then you also have him finish second in King of the Desert 4. And in King of the Desert 5, he lost to Hera in the quarterfinals. And who knows what would have happened if he doesn't lose to Hera, right? So Arabia seems to fit this guy's playstyle, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not only that, in King of the Desert 5, he took 2 wins off of Hera. I remember one of the games being rather close as well, so it could have been gone to 7 games. The only other person that took a game off Hera in at least the playoff bracket was Yo. He got one win. So, like, that was another one of those Hera runs where you're just like, can anybody beat the guy? And you just end up being impressed with someone who takes the most games off him. Yeah, Vinch is good, man. Vinch is really good. I think what we've been a little spoiled with in Age of Empires is we've had these reigns of extreme consistency. And so what happens then is consistency is the expectation. Even with like someone like Yo, we just think consistently top 5, even if he's not winning, right? But that's not everybody. There's lots of examples of players who aren't always making the deep run every time. MBL is an example I could think of there, but still just a big name. And Vinch, I think he had like a rough year, and everyone's didn't lose their minds, but everyone just thought he fell off entirely. Like he forgot to ride the Age of Empires bike. He's good, man. He's good, and I think for him, I think he was busy. Things were happening, and if you're not like dedicating every moment to this game, and everyone else is, there's going to be some faltering steps here or there. So I'm really happy for him. He's one of the nicest guys in the scene, and his talent. He's also just really fun to watch. Like his lack of hesitation to micro moments where no one should ever think about fighting it is hilarious. It's maybe a bit stubborn, but like I'm thinking of the game he played against Vivi, where it's 3 mangonels and he's got 5 plumes, hopping in and out of his TC, trying to split micro. I'm just like, Vinchester, what are you doing? And he somehow almost came back and won the game. So I love the guy to death.
Yeah, I agree. Great. I'd love to see him in Red Bull because he historically has been doing really well in Red Bull tournaments as well, right?
Yeah.
I'd love to see him there. So you just brought it up a couple of minutes ago, and I'd like to go back to it just for a little bit. In the absence of a King of the Desert, this tournament is obviously like the closest thing we could ever have in terms of settings, but I believe we in the community have slowly been shifting away from one-map tournaments, right? Again, I'm going to be betraying my age here, but I'm old enough to remember us having a Masters of Arabia and a Masters of the Huns in the same year. So, again, it must have been 2012 or something like that. Now, it's pretty easy to look at this tournament and go, wow, Arabia is Arabia. We need an S-tier Arabia tournament every year. Now, personally, I do tend to prefer multiple map tournaments, but I got to say this one makes a very, very strong case for the need of a regular Arabia-only tournament. So where do you stand in this whole one map versus multi-map tournament thing?
I'm kind of in the middle. I think it's extremely easy to get tired of one thing and find something else refreshing. And in this case, we've had a lot of mixed map tournaments, and we haven't had an Arabia-only tournament in some time. So combining the Arabia only with all the upsets we had and some stellar games along the way, I think it's very easy to say we should maybe do this more frequently. It is very likely that would happen. And if it does happen, we may have every favorite stomp who people think they're going to stomp, and then people think it's boring again, right? So I tend to just think that what's good for the scene is a mix of kind of everything, right? And for the most part, we've had that. I actually think the scene is lacking a few more closed map tournaments for 1v1s. John Slow's really been the main one who's hosted these events. You had like the Masters of Arenas, the Walhalla, that
was
stuff.
Fun.
Like,
that was fun.
I actually think those events should maybe be sprinkled in a little bit more. But now we've got like the Red Bull coming up, which is Empire Wars again. Just variety's key. And it's especially good when we have a pretty diverse scene where some players are good on this type, some players are good on this type. It just makes it fun. So I guess to choose a side, yeah, I'd love to see more Arabia tournaments.
Really?
But I don't know, like in replacement of another, I guess is where it gets tricky, right? Because Mem hosted King of the Desert. Does he want to then lose out on or skip over a Warlords, for example? It's kind of tough to make that decision, I think.
Yeah, again, I believe, I might be wrong here, but I believe this Arabia tournament was like a perfect storm of a lot of different factors that made it unbelievable, and we already talked about it. So yeah, let's move on. Tristan, our good friend Nili is back. Roughly 2 weeks ago, he announced on his YouTube channel he's once again working for Microsoft and once again working as the tournament coordinator for the whole Age of Empires franchise. So according to him, this is like a 40-hour-a-week position, which I believe is a lot more than he was doing the first time around. And that means he'll have more responsibilities and more power to influence things, from what I understood anyway. Now, I don't want to put you here on the spot right away or anything, or maybe I do want to do it, but you, along with a host of other people, were pretty critical of Nili's first stint as tournament coordinator, you know, especially towards like the end of his tenure with the whole N4C debacle and so on. So, do you welcome this announcement?
I absolutely welcome it. I mean, my criticisms, it was all at a different time, right? That was at a point where Age of Empires 4 was coming out, and I found out that Age of Empires 2 didn't have a single tournament blocked by Microsoft for a 9-month period. I was freaking out, right? Everyone was upset, and obviously Nili's job at that point was to fill the calendar. And I think what ended up happening was people didn't really know that they could reach out, right? And they thought it was all Age of Empires 4 was the whole thing.
If I remember correctly, it was like people were expecting that all of the money was going to go to Age of Empires 4 anyway, and they might have been like, well, why should I care? Why should I try to have money for Age of Empires 2 when I know all of it's going to go for Age of Empires 4? You know?
It was a bunch of different things, which I don't think is worth getting into at this point, because again, it was a different time.
We've been through it, yeah.
And all that, in my opinion, is kind of water under the bridge. It's in no way representative of our current situation. Our current situation is there's still sizable amounts of money going towards Age of Empires 2. Age of Empires 2 is like has a big focus for Microsoft. So and like, you know, there's also the very personal aspect as well. Like, I have very good friends with Nili and want Nili involved in the scene. So and I really valued Nili's opinions and thoughts on competitive things, right? Also, from my perspective, I could be very direct and straight with Nili on things. Where if it was someone I didn't know as well, I would have to
tip around a little bit,
word it differently and be a little bit more respectful. With Nili, I'm like going to be like, no, that's just straight up horrible. This is why, you know.
Right.
And if I don't agree with him, he doesn't agree with me, it's okay. We get it. It's not a big deal. So that's really nice. And I hope that that's the same thing for others too. And there's no longer that conflict where you have someone in that tournament coordinator position who is receiving funds for their own events or involved directly with like an org in the scene. He was kind of wearing a couple hats in the past. So now he's there. I will say, you know, if you know Nili, he's on top of things, and I'm a little stressed at the moment because we're like planning. I know what the whole freaking next year is looking like and what could happen, which is good for the scene. But he's doing his job, man. He's doing his job, and we're having lots of conversations all the time. So, you know, great for the scene, great for Nili, and yeah, I have no issues with it.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of things, and my spies keep telling me a couple of things, and if what I'm hearing is true, this year is still going to be nuts, bro. People better buckle up, because this year is going to be nuts. In any case, I agree with a lot of what you said, especially with your last point right there, where he was wearing different hats. I personally never had anything against anything Nili did the first time around. I think he was wrong, obviously. You know, he put his chips and his money on the wrong horse, I want to say. Sure. That much is clear. But I don't think that's something you can criticize him for. You know, he made a mistake, and that mistake ended up hurting him more than anything or anyone else. What I did have a problem with was just the glaring and blatant conflict of interest that existed between his position as the tournament coordinator and him as a tournament organizer. You know, in Portugal, we have this saying, I don't know if you have it too over there. It's not enough for Caesar's wife to be virtuous. She must be seen to be virtuous. And I kind of feel the same thing about Nili here. I know Nili, and I've known him long enough to know for a fact he's a serious person. He loves the game. He loves the community. Yeah. But I also think it's important the community sees him to be all of those things, you know? And I was just speaking a little bit with him, not a very long talk, just a little bit with him the other day. And apparently, from what I understood, his new contract doesn't actually have like a clause or anything that prevents him from receiving Microsoft sponsorship. But he said there's absolutely no way he'll have the time to organize an NAC or something similar in size and scope. as long as he's working 40 hours a week for Microsoft, which
Sure.
makes total sense, right? So that definitely assuages some of my concerns. And again, I agree with you. I think Nili is just as close to perfect for the job as it gets. He knows the scene from inside out, has the experience organizing big events, has experience on how to talk to sponsors and how to get them involved. I think this is also a very important thing.
That's true.
Yeah, so what he said one of his first priorities would be to finally get a public calendar going. And you already talked about he's been down to it. He's been working on that thing. We technically already have such a calendar, Tristan, but currently like only tournaments that have already been announced can be seen there. And the goal would be that viewers and especially players, I think, can have like a more complete overview of the year as a whole, not just like the next immediate tournament. So that's definitely good. But apart from that, what would you wish to see Nili focusing on in these first few weeks, months?
Oof. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that Nili that I think there's really massive need for the tournament coordinator to do that weren't already doing. I think I understand the community has cried for a public calendar. From the organizer side, having to I would go to say there's a downside to that. If I want to do things of a certain magnitude, I can't plan that out a long time in advance, right? So like let's say I wanted to do a LAN event, I might need to commit to a LAN event a year and a half out. I haven't talked to sponsors, organize things like that. So it actually does change things a little bit. I also get, because most people here are community, right? They're people who watch these tournaments watching. I think people, if you're watching Age of Empires podcast, whether it's on a calendar or not, if an event's happening, you're probably paying attention to it anyways. You maybe like one event a year you might use vacay days for, but you guys are dedicated. So even I don't think the calendar really helps hugely there. I know that might be an unpopular opinion. Where it does help is when the majority of our pros are not full-time, when the majority of our pros want to know when they can compete again. And we are always in a position where there are teeter-tottering pros who people never hear about. They're not going to make it public, but they're just like, man, can I keep doing this? Should I keep doing this? How do I schedule my life now as we have an aging scene? So I think it's huge for that. And that is like the biggest thing in my opinion, which should go a long way for the viewers as well, because more of their players will compete in events in theory and be prepared for that event and take it seriously instead of it being a shock or, where's such and such, was away for a week and a half. They planned this vacation 4 months ago, that type of a thing, which is a pretty big deal. So I'm really excited from the players' perspective. And I feel as though that's been the biggest need for the calendar. Players just need to know what's coming up. That way they could schedule their life out and prepare and have hope. Being aware that, okay, I just lost this tournament, but hey, in X, Y, like 3 or 4 months, that tournament's that's going to be my focus this year. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree totally with you. I don't think we're going to see like a massive explosion in viewership just because we have a calendar now. I totally agree with you. But again, for the players, I think this is a very important step as well. So from a purely selfish point of view here, one thing I hope gets done at some point would be to make this whole process of awarding Microsoft sponsorship a little bit less opaque, I want to say, a little bit more transparent. Okay. I'd love for there to be written information somewhere about what you need in order to apply for the sponsorship, What are sort of the minimum requirements, if you will? And I also would like to know what like the metrics that Microsoft would expect to achieve or would expect you to achieve in order to receive the money from them. Because, a little side story here, I've toyed several times with the idea of organizing a tournament myself and applying for sponsorship, which in my case would always be incredibly complicated because I'm not a streamer. I'd have to partner with someone and so on. But I have no clue what are the numbers Microsoft is expecting to hear. So my worry here is I apply to Microsoft, I put their numbers I'm expecting to reach, and the guys are going to go like, you serious? This is all you think you're going to get? Come on, don't be ridiculous, Realistically, I don't think it's going to happen. But, more transparency is almost always a good thing.
Yeah, sure. I think like part of what you just said is a big deal. Is like at least people need to know where to go to try and submit that, right? Like even now, like Nili's the tournament coordinator. Are they DMing him on Discord, right? Like what are they subscribing to his Twitch, sending a screenshot of the sub, and like, what are they doing? Obviously, that's not it. But in my case, I've always been pretty connected. I'm fortunate I kind of know the direct lines,
right.
but yeah, I think having an official way to pitch something is great, and I also think pitching. Or maybe Microsoft as a whole being a little bit more open to investing lesser amounts for smaller events could be good. Now, there's downsides. Microsoft typically, if they're putting money towards an event, they want that to be the focus. They're putting money in for a reason. But $2,000-$3,000 for some smaller community tournaments that overlap with other things, I think could have some positives.
You think there should be more tournaments, and some of those tournaments should have a little bit less money, a little bit smaller prize pools?
I'm more so saying it from a perspective of like up and coming creators having a little bit of support, because like I remember before Microsoft put any money up, right? How difficult it was with a smaller community to justify putting money in or get the money at all, right? It's doable, and we have a lot of supportive viewers that can support creators, but I think having a little bit to uplift smaller creators to do some cool projects would be good.
I agree totally. And I've also thought about, wow, now I'm kind of opening my heart here and opening the book. I've thought about for the longest time about having, what's HLTV? You know what that is? It's like, it's like a news website for Counter-Strike. And it's basically the community website. You have Reddit, of course, but it's like if you want like the news website, you have HLTV. I'd love at some point to try to make something like that happen. I need people. I need people to help me write articles and have several. What about Microsoft sponsoring something like that? But again, I'm just so afraid it's going to be such a ridiculous and outlandish idea. I don't even try to communicate with them.
I will say, so on your idea, I will say one very obvious issue with one of your ideas there, to play devil's advocate, is like a company like Microsoft is very worried about naturally offending anyone, upsetting anyone, not being inclusive, right? If they produce a list of requirements, they would feel like every single person who submitted and hit those requirements would have to receive something. Otherwise, there's going to be some backlash and people would be upset, right? So I think that is maybe you make the requirements so high that you're not going to get a lot of people, but then you're going to have the same people on the list anyways, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So that's kind of a tricky thing. I think the big thing, at least what I would do in their position, is make it clear this is where you can submit. It's likely you're not going to get anything because we have a very rigid schedule here, but maybe it can happen because I'll use them again. John Slow, in terms of his size of a creator, isn't necessarily someone who you would think of done the events of the magnitude he's done. Walhalla, and the work he's done on that, and some of these close
Sudden Disaster was him
fun.
too, right?
It's got lots of viewers, right? And now I would say, as an organizer, worthy of more money from Microsoft. So that was an example of the type of individual who's shown something over time that wouldn't have gotten the heads up right away. Right. I actually don't know if he got Microsoft money right away. I actually should maybe have that information, but it just felt like a good example to bring up in terms of his channel size and what his events accomplish and how much people like them.
All right, so one thing I'd love to do here is to speculate wildly about stuff. And sometimes I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. But let me cook a little bit here, Tristan. So, during Nili's first run as tournament coordinator, apparently he was only spending like a few hours a week working in that capacity. Then after he quit, I believe it was Ashley, our good friend, Ashley Lynn. I'm sure you remember her from Voobly, right? I mean, you've been in contact with her, I'm sure. But I remember her from Voobly, from the Voobly days especially.
Yeah.
I believe she took over from Nili, but she was already working full-time for World's Edge, if I'm not mistaken. So tournament coordination was like only a very small part of her responsibilities, if I'm not mistaken. So if Microsoft now has decided to give Nili a 40-hour-a-week contract to fill the role of tournament coordinator, could this mean Microsoft is actually planning on increasing funding for tournament sponsorship? Because that way, I hope, man, because if they were doing just fine with someone spending a few hours here and there taking care of things, why are they now making this a full-time position with one employee only, and one employee fully dedicated to it? I don't think this would be crazy to imagine, and it would be awesome.
Maybe,
of course.
Maybe. I mean, that'd be the dream, right? I think you know, I always wondered if like the amount that events can receive is based on the professionalism or connections to other companies. I mean, it always is to some degree, but how much is tricky. And maybe if someone like Nili's got more connections or more experience with those things, if there's so I imagine he's definitely working within a certain budget, right?
Mhm.
But I know that there are exceptions at times where, like Red Bull, for
Right.
example, an event in a castle, that is someone saying, hey, this is an idea, this is a connection. They go to a guy who's a couple steps up to
Of
cut a
course.
couple checks, right?
Coca-Cola comes in, they're getting
Yeah.
$200,000, regardless of what.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like if you have a organizer who could maybe foster those connections a little bit more, maybe then that does actually open up opportunities where again you can go outside or above whatever the established budget is to get approval for certain things. So I personally I haven't had many massive indications that we're going to have this big budget
Right.
explosion,
No, yeah, I'm not
but
expecting that. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, but I agree with you that there's actually a lot more potential for bigger events. I think if you maybe could pitch the right thing, that Nili then is the guy to present
Right.
that and have it turn into something bigger. So
Right. And again, considering how good Nili is with actually talking with sponsors and getting him involved, him having more time to do all of those things can only be good, in my opinion.
yeah, in theory, yep.
Hey guys, quick interruption in our podcast just for a little bit of sellout. I promise, very short. As you might have noticed, I've been wearing my jersey, my game releasing jersey, my hat. If you would like to support our team, support our players, make sure to give a look. Check the shop, see if there's something you like. If you do find something, don't forget to use our players' codes for a spicy discount. Thank you very much. All right, but speaking of big Microsoft sponsorship, we have 2 weeks left until the July 20th deadline for the Red Bull qualification ladder. Once the deadline is reached, the top 4 players on the ladder will be officially qualified for Red Bull El Reinado, which will take place early October in Spain. Those who don't make it through the ladder will have one last chance to qualify through the very aptly named Last Chance Qualifier, which will take place between the 10th and the 18th of August. So, Tristan, as we speak, and things might change, of course, by the time you're listening, the top 4 highest achieved ratings right now look like this. You have Leary first with 1976 ELO. Then it's Mr. Yo 1946, MBL 1917, and Hera 1910. So, what are you expecting to see in the next 2 weeks here, Tristan? Do you see things changing a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I do expect that things are going to be that some names are going to hop in and out of that top 4 constantly over the next 2 weeks. It's natural. It's going to be back and forth, I think, a bit. In terms of the people that I expect to qualify, my thinking right now, and if you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, my thinking would have been a bit different. But my thinking right now is there's 2 spots which I feel are fairly expected to be filled. Hera Leary, that's where I'm at. In Hera's case, well, in both cases, they're extremely talented, but there's the other factor with the ladder system is how much time are you going to invest, right? And where's your motivation? For Hera, it's also content for him. It's his full-time thing. I expect Hera to fit the motivation, time, and skill and get there. Right. Leary, again, 2 weeks ago, I wasn't really sure where he was going, but it's starting to click. He is Mr. Empire Wars or former Mr. Empire Wars,
an extraordinaire, or whatever you call it.
Yeah, and he's been pretty active with it too. So I also think that Leary's win rate on other players who are active on the ladder is really good for him, which we may get to.
Yeah,
the other spots, it's going to be crazy. There will be heartbreak. There will be drama. There's no way around it. Whether it's one person picking the same civ all the time, or maybe a villager getting bugged in a wood line. I hope it's nothing like that crazy near the tail end.
Bro, listen,
it's going to be crazy.
Something I saw happen. So this is a good friend of mine. He's called Savvy Empires, and I know we've watched him a couple of times. I know we watched him a couple of times. So he plays in the mornings, and I watch him in the mornings, and we chat a lot. And he got Barrels in the Empire Wars ladder. And at that point, he was like 5 points away from Kapach and 5 points away from the top 4. if he meets Savvy 4 times in a row, he's in, right? At least at that point. And alone the fact that something like this can happen, I find it a little bit questionable. But yeah,
there's even more extreme examples, right? Like I am playing horribly right now. It's bad. And
you were number 1 on the ladder at some point, and then
before people took it seriously, they changed. Really, honestly, it's a map pool issue more than anything. They took away all the maps. But no, like I'm 60th on the ladder right now, and I've only played 45 games.
All right.
So I haven't played a lot of games. Imagine a situation which it's the last day, and I queue up and get MBL 3 times in a row and sling him, I don't know, 15, 16 points to 4th. What are people going to say? The T90 did that intentionally? I could have just been queuing up randomly. There's a lot of like things that could happen. I think there's going to be a lot of pre-dodging, meaning you see so-and-so is online, you wait till they get a game, and then you queue.
Right.
And that cannot be, you cannot ban against that. What they are looking at is if someone gets a game and they alt F4, that's something that obviously you're going to deal with. But yeah, people are going to be choosy on civs, maps, and whatnot because there's tons of money on the line and the system incentivizes it. So it's going to be wild, man. And I think like 10 to 12 names have realistic shots to try and squeak into that 3rd to 4th spot.
All right.
Depending on, with all that other stuff in mind, they have those chances, I think.
That's interesting. I would not have assumed that so many players would have the chance still, in my opinion, but I'm glad to hear it. So I was just watching this morning. It's a video that Nili released in his YouTube channel with MBL and Larry. I'll be linking it below, and thought it was really interesting. And MBL was saying he's going to take his last week off from work, and he's just going to be playing. Well, no, he's just going to be at home. That's what he said. Not necessarily to play more games, but like to monitor the developments on the ladder. And as soon as someone gets a little bit too close to comfort, he'll just jump into the ring, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Leary is like, so it's going to be 12 hours of watching the spectator dashboard and 30 minutes of playing.
it's pretty accurate, literally probably, just yesterday or like 2 days ago, MBL played a couple of games against Leary. And then I think he lost 2, and then he won 2, and then he goes, I'm done playing Empire Wars, and queues up in normal ranked, and Leary shows up to his chat, and he's like 14 queue, and MBL's like, no, I'm not losing my points to you, so it's already happening. Dude.
Yeah. So far, from what I see, players are taking it nicely, players are not getting too stressed out about it. Well, in case Doubt, I've seen he gets a little bit angry at times, but I feel like players are taking it nicely. I really hope it doesn't explode into like full-blown drama. I really hope that doesn't happen.
Agreed. I think where realistically, because like if you're dodging opponents, if you're avoiding playing certain people, realistically you're not a top 4 player. You're gonna have to play games to get into the spots. I think where things get tricky is if like someone gets, so I'm looking at the rankings right now, right? We have Vinchester 8, we have Sito 9. Let's say Vinch and Sito both struggle to beat someone like MBL every time they play MBL. But on the last day, Vinchester, Sito are queuing up at the same time, and they have a 6-game streak where one player wins 5-1, right? Then you look at the situation where Vinch or Sito hops into 4th spot, yet they rarely beat MBL percentage-wise on the ladder. That's where it's like, if the system is to pick the best 4 players, did it just do that? And that is where I think there will be potential drama, but it's not like you're going through any loopholes or anything crazy there,
right?
Honestly.
We talked about this in the pre-show before we started recording, that we are actually going to focus a lot more on whether this was a good idea, this system, or the flaws, what could be improved. We're going to talk about all of that in the next episode, which, by the way, we're going to be recording right after the deadline. But I want to talk about something that you mentioned there that I think is very important. You were talking about the flexibility between some of the players, because sometimes some players are full-time, others are not. And it's something that a lot of people have been talking about. And whenever you try to tweak the system, whenever people were talking about tweaking the system, making it a little bit better here and there, a lot of the critiques was that certain systems favored full-timers a little bit too much, and that they have too much of an advantage. And I'd like to run this point through you. I totally understand where they're coming from, but I do have to wonder. We do want more people to dedicate themselves fully to Age of Empires 2, right? That's a good thing. We want that to happen. So if you have like 2 players roughly the same level, one of them is desperately trying to make it full-time, but the other one doesn't really care too much whether he makes it full-time or not. Isn't it actually a good thing you're giving the full-timer just the slight advantage? Because, I mean, we do want to make it more viable to become a full-time Age of Empires 2 player or content creator or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, more reasons to dedicate yourself to the game, to prepare to play. That's what any competitive situation wants, whether it's this, game or anything else. I think you always look towards anyone successful in anything, and one thing that they're going to have is a lot of time commitment to that craft, right? Yeah, I agree. And where it gets tricky is like, and this is why I think right now we have a lot of the top guys sitting on their points, is if you spend a lot of time on the ladder right now, you get high elo, but your elo doesn't necessarily mean that you're actually 300 elo or 200 elo higher than the other guy. So if some guy who's similar to skill in you hasn't been grinding all month and comes in the last week and their wins earn them 25 elo of your elo, which you've built up with your +4, +5, +6s, that's where it's like, that's the flip side of it, is actually the people who spend a little bit more time doing it might kind of feel a wrong way about it. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I am very glad that we're discussing the legitimacy of this type of ladder qualification post ladder, because we need to see how it goes.
Absolutely.
There's all these potentials, but we're merely speculating. It's really hard to actually know what's going to happen, but I'm with you that I really hope that there's nothing major. I hope there's always some, comments here or there with any tournament about various things. I hope it's along those lines,
I agree. Another thing I wanted to ask you, because a lot of people were expecting these last few weeks to have a lot more, have like a boom in activity.
Yeah.
And considering what I just told you with that video about MBL and Larry, and considering that I believe a lot of the people who look up and see they're 300 points away, 200 points away, they're probably just going to be like, bah, forget it. I'm never going to get there.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, basically no one plays Empire Wars because they enjoy it. Basically, like some folks do. Okay, true. The vast majority.
I'm like, who you're talking to here.
The vast majority
former number 1 on the ladder over here. Jeez, Nelson.
Totally forgot about that again. Yeah, you get my point though. Are we really expected to see a rise in activity? Because I totally see a lot of people doing what MBL just said he's going to do. Which, by the way, absolutely zero critique. This is totally... Yeah, he should do it. He wants to qualify. He should do it.
I think we're certainly going to see more than we've seen over the last month and a half, 2 months. When they announced this, it was a 3-month window. And there were a lot of questions from people like, why is no one hyped? Like, it's 3 months, right? The next 2 weeks, I expect to be fairly big flurry, but you're absolutely right. Like, I'm good friends with people who are 40th, 50th, 60th in the world. These guys know they have no shot. Right. So they're not even going to play. So this dream that hundreds of people at the high level are going to be competing isn't really the case. If anything, some of these 40, 50, 60 guys are like, thank God I'm not running into Hera on RM.
Right.
And I can actually, maybe I can get a new elo high because I'm not running into these guys. So it's actually kind of a fun free time on the main ladder right now.
Didn't think about that.
People,
That's so true, though. It's so true.
Yeah, but I do think 2 to 3 dozen people will go hard.
Okay.
So it will be very active until some people come to the conclusion that, okay, I've tried this week. I'm not even close.
Not happening. Yeah.
I'm just going to wait for the last chance qualifier and prepare some stuff for a draft.
Right.
So
right. Totally fair. Okay, so then I have a few stats here that I've already shared with you, and I'd like to share it with the viewers as well. So just check the description box below in order to see these. I'm going to put them on the screen too. So all of these have been kindly collected and curated by Nerfox. He's an amazing community member. He's excellent with these types of things. He has collaborated with a lot of tournament organizers, I believe for NAC, if I'm not mistaken. He was the one doing all those funny stats that show up on screen, if I'm not mistaken. So I'd like to go through these together with you, Tristan. And, well, look at this. Host is not ready with the link. Well, there it is. Okay, so I'd like to jump to the head-to-head first. And when you look at this, we were just talking about the the win rate of Nili. Nili is doing amazing right now, right? So he has basically positive win rate against everybody except for Vinchester. Hera, interestingly enough, he's losing against ACCM. 3 games losing against ACCM. Right there, I thought I said 3 times C. ACCM. No. ACCCCM.
I think you did it. Yeah.
Did I? Did I say 3 times?
I don't know. I don't know. You just did there, but it felt natural.
I felt like it did. Then Mysterio, we have Mysterio with a rough time against Nili. 33% win rate, but otherwise doing very well. So a few standouts here to me, Tristan, is that someone like Kapaj seems to have a somewhat lower win rate against some of these top guys that they're at the top. Then you have Doubt basically losing to everybody. Well, this guy's been playing a lot, to be fair. This guy's been playing a lot. But yeah, anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Doubt's a big one. Doubt is actually a really interesting case for this. He's someone I wanted to bring up today. I feel the example I just gave moments ago of a player who puts on the grind hard and then realizes maybe I shouldn't stress myself out for this final week and I should just prepare drafts and go for civs. That might be the category Doubt falls into, at least based on what the data suggests here. The one that is interesting to me, actually, was Kapaj, because he's been fairly competitive with MBL, 43% win rate over 21 games. That's a lot of games. And MBL's been in that top 4 pretty consistently.
Right.
So, like, imagine a world where Kapaj isn't beating a lot of these other top 4, top 6 guys, but he's playing, he's grinding, and maybe, nerves start to seep in the last day or two for MBL. He loses some games, so he can't sit on his elo and he has to work. Kapaj, maybe. I mean, I don't think I do really feel like you look at the data and you see some of the games he's just not been able to win against some of these names. You shouldn't favor him, but he's a grinder, dude. So that's the one that stands out to me. And I think mainly that's just because Kapaj has also played a lot of games. So we really don't have as much data here from, like, most players that we would really want to make proper judgments.
Right. So just to make it clear, this is these are stats for the current top 16 players on the ladder. Again, this can change very quickly. As you can see, these guys are actually lined up in the correct order. But as we speak, Doubt is actually number 8. Right here, he's number 11, 10. Well, actually number 8, so it's correct.
I think he's number 1 in games played, though.
Which would be...
Like, he's played... I don't think we have the exact number added up.
From all of these guys,
a lot of the players...
No, you're totally correct. 382 games from the top 16. He's got the most games. That's totally accurate and correct.
And there's, like, players with legitimate chances, I think, that might not have even been over 100 yet. So, yeah, Doubt has kind of hurt himself in some ways because I heard Nili explain it. He said it was funny. Doubt will play and get wins for a couple hours, and then he's just so addicted to playing he won't stop.
I heard it too, yeah.
And then he loses all of his progress and then gets frustrated and then continues to play even more. So it's funny, I was just watching Doubt before this. He had been live for 7 hours playing only Empire Wars, and he was on like a -3 streak. So
no, man.
he's playing a lot, but
he's really trying.
It might be hurting him a little
really
bit.
Trying.
Yeah.
All right, so then I don't think we can talk a lot about Civ win rate because there's just not enough games here. Another very interesting graph here, though. The Civ, so CO2 Civs. You look at this one.
This is fun.
Hello, what is Byzantines doing there? Also pretty interesting, like 50-50 in terms of mirror and non-mirror. Why are people just spamming Byzantines?
Well, Hollow Woodlands is a map that Doubt, Nili, and MBL have played a lot. And they all have been more active than some of the other names. So that's the first thing. And then they all came to the conclusion very quickly that Byzantines are insane. I actually remember it was MBL against Dark Game where MBL lost to Byzantines. He then toggled on Byzantines in force pick for the first time because I always have a stream up. And then that started the Skirm Fest. And actually people experimented with the Dravidians, which isn't too far away on that list, because Dravidian skirms fire faster and you start with the extra wood to make the ranges. So, but listen, I think, like, if you're a player and winning matters so much here on the ladder, the thinking of variety is fun goes out the window.
Right.
Which is what a lot of people think for ranked usually. So Instead, you don't welcome that variety because they get a better civ than you, and then you're just not being invited to Spain for a big event. So I think we will see a lot of mirrors because then it is as skillful as it gets. Everyone's got the same civ. Or we will see a lot of people just force picking the civ that they think is the best on the map, which at least for Hollow Woodlands, I think is Byzantines. But other maps, it could depend. It could vary.
Yeah, I think people are not just yet showing the strats they're going to be using. I think maybe in the last week we're going to see more of that. All right.
I love how Celts is at the bottom with 5. Sorry to interrupt. I bet you any money that's Huang, dude.
No, then I would expect it to be much more than just 5. Oh, well, these are only top 16, to be fair. Again, it's only games between the top 16.
I'm wrong then. I'm wrong.
It's not going to be Huang. All right, so looking at the timeline, I think this is also pretty interesting to see the activity on the ladder. So you could see at the beginning there was a lot of games, a lot of activity, that it sort of dies down pretty much. But for starting July 1st, you can see that there's a lot more activity again. But it seems to be slowing down again, which again goes to the point that we were just discussing earlier, whether we're really going to see an explosion or not. And then one graph that I also feel like it's interesting, but you can't read too much into it, is the upset wins, Tristan. So this again, how many wins you had against a player that was placed above you on the ladder. So for example, for Leary and Harry, going to see 0 because these guys are always at the top of the ladder. So that's why. But a few outliers here are interesting, in my opinion. Hart, you see him winning a lot of games against people that are placed above him. And Sebastian feels to me like, which goes to show, man, these guys are in incredible shape and they do have a shot of making it, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I got excited when I saw those names because I could envision both of those two maybe slotting into that 3rd or 4th spot or somewhere in the top 4. Nikov's pretty high on the list too. Nikov's always had the skill set to be very good in these settings. I think if it's like 8 people qualifying via ladder, you put Nikov in there. So he's close, but it's 4, unfortunately, for him. So yeah, that's cool to see. That's really cool to see. That this is not a stat that I knew we had, actually. And I think these are the players that the top 4 need to be careful of. You know, this is the reason why someone like MBL has been a little outspoken about, you know, camping your points a little bit and not spreading the love as much. So Sebastian, Hart, Nikov, they should be getting the games in this week to make sure their elos is ramping up just in case there's any camping of the points, not wanting to share any points with lower ranked players.
All right, so, and then before we close the show, Tristan, I'd like to remind folks, we still have the Rage Forest 5 tournament running. Unfortunately, all Gamer Legion players have been eliminated from the tournament. Doubt was our last hope, but he lost to Team Ganji in the quarterfinals. So now we have Team Ganji and Team Sito in one semifinal, and Team Valis against Team Barrels in the other one. I believe Team Barrels should be like the favorite here because Team Barrels, I think he has won like the 2 previous editions, so Rage Forest 3 and Rage Forest 4. The final will take place on July 21st. I have to confess, I haven't followed the tournament as closely as I would like to. There were just too many other tournaments going on at the same time. Have you watched some of the series?
I've watched very little for the same reasons. Just the fact that there was the Arabia tournament happening with all the upsets. I always have it on in the background, but it hasn't been like, I guess for me, it's have I casted a series because that's when I've really paid attention, and I haven't gotten around to doing one yet. So.
I've talked about this many times here before in the show. Despite being incredibly fun to play, Tristan, unfortunately 4v4s are just too convoluted, in my opinion, and too busy for even for experienced viewers such as myself. So, I mean, if I tune in the middle of the game, it really takes me a while to figure out what's happening. You know, you have all the flashing dots and the 1000 stats on the overlay. It's just too disorienting for most folks, I'd imagine. So I think in terms of reaching a wider audience, this is something that it will always be difficult for 4v4 tournaments, I believe. I think 2v2s are probably the best team game format, where you get like a team game dynamic, and yet it's still digestible enough for the casual viewer. I've told you this once. I remember we were having a chat at point to tell you, when is the next 2v2 coming, bro? Because I watched it from your YouTube channel. Your 2 most watched videos of like esports commentary are the 2v2 World Cup. So I think 2v2 is probably the sweet spot if you want to have like a team game tournament and still be digestible enough, I want to say.
Would you say 2v2 Black Forest is digestible?
It can be fun. It can be fun. You know, another thing that I noticed about this tournament as well, which I think is funny, it's a lot more fun for me, and this is no slight to anybody, obviously, when I'm watching a player and when I hear the comms. And there's so much intensity, so much immersion. I feel like in the middle of the team, really rooting for the guys. And I think a big part of it, well, is that human aspect. You hear the intensity, the whole thing, And the other aspect is that I don't get to see everything, which is maybe good because it's too much information in a 4v4. It's just too much information. So you're seeing one side of the map, you're seeing what one guy is doing, what two players are doing maybe, and you still hear what's happening on the other side because the other guys are communicating the whole time, So I don't know. For me, it's like the best viewing experience for these types of 4v4 tournaments, which I thought was fun to realize.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also cool. The format, my favorite format of this particular tournament is the fact that you have team captains and you are voting in other players. And so what it is you have like the big name who's brought in the underdog, so to speak. A lot of these players are very good. A lot of these players have been around and are well known within Black Forest community, but they are not well known from the community. So I think that's cool too, because you can hear them and you can know about, like, they're from different countries, they've got different personalities, and that adds to the flavor. And I actually think, I was thinking about this, I think something that would really benefit the Rage Forest event, and I don't know if I'm the most suited for it, but it definitely jives with me because I tend to do this so much that some people complain about it. But I think is give backgrounds on the team, right? It's not just like, hey, here we have Doubt's team. Here we have such and such's team. Like, I want someone to, like, I as a viewer, I think viewers would really benefit from being like, dude, this guy's been playing Black Forest since 2013. His team thinks this is his skill set. And then when the viewer's like, oh, okay, that's what he does. And then, 20 minutes later, they're like, oh, I could see that. I could see he's working away on that boom. I think you're right. There's too much information, but I also think with how diverse these teams are, people would all benefit from a little bit more information on how the players tend to play, because it's so cool, man. Like it is amazing how many 1600s are insane on Black Forest and can completely smash
so true.
Pro players that have been above 2K for so long. I love that about this
On
tournament.
That point, though, I'm glad to report to you that indeed is happening for this tournament. So the whole thing is basically being streamed by Daniela AoE. I'm sure you've heard about her. We're definitely going to put her stream down below, her YouTube channel as well. So I believe she's like the official streamer for this tournament, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And she's covering all of it. And I think she made such videos for the captains, for the team captains. What are they known for? Right. So what are they known for? What are their specialties and stuff like that? So for people who really want to go have a deep dive in this tournament, definitely check that out.
That's cool.
Yeah, I know you like... It's one thing that I think you're excellent. I think you're excellent at these kinds of things, like creating narratives, again, during the games, creating these stories. I think you're excellent at doing that.
You have to, because otherwise you're just watching a Black Forest game.
You need to give me some of that at some point. Give me some of that, bro, at some point, okay? You have enough of it. All right, Tristan, listen, man, this was a lot of fun. Great to have you here to talk a little bit about Age of Empires. And if you at home enjoyed the show too, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As I just said before, you can expect our next episode in roughly 2 weeks. That would be right after the July 28th deadline for the Red Bull ladder, where I'll suspect we'll have a bit of drama, as we just said, and we get to dissect a lot of the drama. I just hope it's not too much. In any case, Tristan, it was awesome having you here, man, and I'll see you next time.
Yep, see ya.